thumbs up if you can see me.
I'm right here, man.
All right, we're good. Had a little bit of technical difficulties there. You know what happened when two dads tried to do a podcast. It doesn't always go out right. So we're going to talk about the college football playoff rankings tonight. They were just released. It looks like the Indiana Hoosiers have a new enemy, and his name is Joey Galloway. He's actually throwing out, Lance. He threw out the fact Indiana should sit Curtis Rourke this Saturday because losing without your quarterback, it would be less detrimental than just losing with your starting quarterback. And you should have seen Greg McElroy's face.
Yeah, I can tell GMAC is pretty. He kind of is more gun. Both of them, Galloway and McElroy, were a little more guns blazing this version of the rankings. And
Yeah.
we both listened to McElroy on Mac and Cube there on Jocks 94.5 in Birmingham. We listen to him weekly, and it's obvious when he comes back to his radio show on a weekly basis from the CFP rankings that he's not the most thrilled with how things that are being said on the live TV show, and that was
Yeah.
very obvious tonight. And it was obvious that Galloway, kind of his same old,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
strange, man. That's again, I don't know really why they have him on there. It's almost like he's not even a fan of college football playoffs at this point.
No, no.
Yeah.
Not very smart. So let's pull up the rankings here. We'll kind of start at the bottom this time and kind of work our way up towards the top. And let's just share some thoughts with the people here. We appreciate everybody tuning in right now. Let's see. All right. Let's start off with the bottom down there. Illinois and UNLV jump in. That's not much of a surprise after we saw Louisville, Kansas State, LSU. Who was the other team that took a tumble this week?
Kansas State, LSU, Louisville, and I'm not sure who the other one was. Was there anybody else?
I think there was one more, but honestly, I can't remember. Honestly, it doesn't matter because they're out of the rankings. But you know who is in the rankings? That team that the committee just cannot quit, man. And that's the Missouri Tigers. They can do no wrong in the committee's eyes.
Yeah, and I keep asking you each week because I know you've been kind of like they should drop Missouri out of the rankings. They need to drop Missouri out of the rankings, and I get it. They don't really have any good wins, but hey, the committee loves good losses. We already know that, and they've got losses to Texas A&M and Alabama, and now at South Carolina. All three teams ranked in the top 18, so their strength of schedule just keeps getting better, but they don't have any good wins.
Yeah.
So I'd be honest with you. I'm a little surprised that Kansas State, that actually does have wins over multiple ranked teams that are in these rankings. They're a 3-loss team now, Kansas State, just like Missouri is, just like Illinois is. And Kansas State has beaten number 20 Tulane at Tulane, and they have beaten Colorado at Colorado.
Yeah.
So interesting that K-State is not ranked at all. That was really, again, I don't have some huge quarrel with this at the bottom. If I had to rank another team, it would be Kansas State.
Yeah.
Is who I would have in here.
Yeah. Iowa State jumps in. Not much of a surprise. Arizona State, props to the Sun Devils and Kenny Dillingham up to number 21. They got a big one this week with BYU, so I'm glad they're finally getting some recognition there at 21.
Absolutely.
Tulane.
Go ahead.
Tulane jumps up 5. Army jumps up 5. And that's, I'm not sure if that's the set American Conference Championship or not. But if it is, that's going to be a great matchup. And if Boise State were to falter down the stretch, the winner of that game would be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I'll go on record and say it here live. I've been telling you this for a few weeks now, and I still 100% believe this. And it sounds like our boy Josh Pate's on board too from his previous episode. He said this as well, that I think Tulane's the best team in the group of 5 right now. I've been saying that for a few weeks. I wish there somehow we could get a Tulane-Boise game on a neutral to decide that, but obviously we're not going to get that. But Boise State's a really good football team. They are. Are they 8 spots better than Tulane in the rankings? No, they're not. Yeah. Again, Tulane challenged themselves against Kansas State and went on the road and played at Oklahoma. But Tulane looks really good right now. That defense is nasty. John Summerall's got that bunch playing really well. But you're right. Army and Tulane are definitely primed to work their way back in there if Boise State were to lose. And I'm like we talked about last week. I'm pretty sure Colorado State has the inroad to playing Boise in the Mountain West Championship game.
Yep.
Uh, no offense, to Colorado State. I think UNLV is a better football team.
Mhm.
Obviously, the committee does too.
Yeah.
So I think Boise's only chance of losing a game would be as if somehow UNLV could work their way back into the Mountain West Championship game. I haven't, uh, taken a deep dive into Mountain West conference standings by any means. We just know
Yeah.
that if Colorado State wins out, Boise wins out, those two teams are going to play each other
Yep. Best 3-loss team in the country right now, number 18, South Carolina.
by
Uh,
far, by the way.
yeah, playing lights out. And then their arch rival, Clemson. That's going to be a good one on the 30th in Clemson at noon on ABC. They're at 17. You got Colorado coming in at 16. Props to Dion. Props to all those guys. I was hard on them. They have a legit football team this year. There's no doubt in that. Them and BYU still have an inside track and still control their destiny to get to the Big 12 championship. You got A&M kind of just stuck in neutral there at 15. I mean, I know they played New Mexico State and didn't really get any bump or fall out of that. So they're kind of just stuck there at 15. And
I
then
mean,
it gets interesting once you get into the top 14. Before we get there, let me ask you a question. If Army were to beat Notre Dame this weekend, where do you see them? Where do you see the committee jumping them up? Like with those teams in front of them, how much respect would they give Army for the schedule they played
mhm.
and obviously for a win as like a 14, 15 point underdog against Notre Dame?
It's a good question, man. Honestly, I could see them going as high as 13. I mean, look at that. Notre Dame's at 6. Okay, I know Boise beat UNLV. I know that happened, but I mean, Boise's best thing that they've done this year is their close loss that they had against Oregon. If Army goes into Notre Dame, who this committee believes is the sixth best team in college football, and
Mhm.
Army were to win that game,
The
yeah,
Yankee
yeah,
Stadium,
man,
yeah,
I think they could absolutely. I mean, there's a chance, man, they jump all the way to 12. Seriously,
yeah,
I know their schedule is much worse than Boise's overall. Like, I think Army's literally one of the like actually worst.
yeah, like 133rd, I think. Liberty's the only one that's worst.
Yeah, so that part's tough. That part's tough. But if they were to beat the number 6 ranked team in the country at their place, yeah, they could take a pretty significant jump up with a win like that. I think no doubt about it. But I wanted to touch on before we moved like into the top 14.
Yeah.
You mentioned Texas A&M.
Hmm.
Their best win right now, it just continues to get worse
Yeah.
with LSU. That's the problem with these unbalanced schedules, kind of like Texas in the SEC. They just don't have a bunch of like none of those top tier teams. You know, well, they haven't played Texas yet. They didn't play Alabama. They didn't play Ole Miss. They didn't play
Yeah.
Georgia. They didn't play Tennessee. So it's just that's the reason why I think they're stuck in neutral like that.
Yeah.
They didn't have that marquee win yet, and then they lost. I mean, got thumped by double digits at South Carolina. And the
Yeah.
last one I want to touch on here is Colorado. Dude, you said it. That's a really good football team, man. They've got a formula right now where on defense, they've got some nasty pass rushers. They get after the quarterback and they affect the quarterback as far as getting in the backfield, getting pressure, QB hurries, sacks, all of that. And that's a pretty good recipe for success because Colorado is building leads on some of these teams with their offense, and other teams are forced to have to throw the football against them. They're not able to sit there and pound the rock and try. I mean, Colorado is holding up fine against the run as well. But the main thing is Colorado is building leads on offense, and that opposing teams are having to throw the football, and Colorado is able to pin their ears back and turn those pass rushers loose. I mean, they've got multiple pass rushers that are going to play in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so it's a good recipe for success, man, because we know that offense can hum. And
Yeah.
we'll talk more about them here in a minute. We'll keep going with the rankings here, but I just wanted to mention those two mainly.
Yeah. So number 14, BYU takes a tumble all the way down 8 spots from number 6, losing at home against a very underrated Kansas team. And interestingly enough, right in front of them at number 13, SMU,
Who they
who
literally beat on the field.
BYU went to SMU
Yep.
on the road earlier this year on a Friday night. They won that game 18-15. BYU has played a tougher strength of schedule than SMU. And even with the head to head, I mean, they're still ranked behind them. Somebody make it make sense.
I'm going to try to.
Okay.
This is where resume wise, it does not make sense. It doesn't. But you and I have talked here recently where, I mean, we're even guilty of it, man. And I don't really know the answer. Again, I don't know the right answer. I don't know that. I mean, you've got to account for resumes. You do. But at some point, too, you have to use common sense and use your eyeballs and the old eye test thing. And like people go, well, what's the eye test? You know, when you look at, I mean, like for example, we were talking about Ole Miss being number one in tackles for a loss and sacks and total offense and scoring offense, all of those metrics, that equals the eye test. When you watch them play football, that's what they're, when you watch them play, that's what they look like when you watch those
Mm-hmm.
things. When I watch SMU play right now, since they've brought Jennings in at quarterback, since they made that move, they look like a better football team than BYU right now. They do. But is that fair to BYU that they've played a tougher schedule and they've got a better resume and then they beat SMU on the field?
Yeah.
I mean, that's tough, man. If I'm a BYU, it's easy for me to sit here and say when I'm not a fan of either one of the teams, it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, you know what? Right now, I do think SMU is a better football team, so I see why the committee ranked them there because in the last 6 weeks, SMU does look like a better team. I know they struggled with Boston College a little bit this past weekend, but all the other games that they've played, they look like a really good football team. And
Mm-hmm.
BYU for the last 4 or 5 weeks has not looked like a really good team. Before the Kansas game, we talked about it. Had they been playing with their food?
Yeah.
And they lost. So they have not looked impressive. I think that's part of it. But let me promise you something. If I was a BYU fan and saw this, I'm pissed. And don't blame them. Don't blame
Yeah.
them one bit.
Yep. Number 12, Boise State, which is important because
Yep.
nobody's higher in the Big 12 than BYU. So Boise State ranked higher than BYU in the projection that we'll get to later when we show the bracket. Boise State's got that first round bye. Like we projected, and predicted this could happen.
So I don't believe Boise State can move another spot up. They don't play
Be tough.
anybody on their schedule that would warrant them moving up. So I think they will not move another spot. The only chance again, and I'll look at it here in a minute while we're going through it. While you're reading some other teams, I'll pull it up on
Okay.
my phone. But like I don't see there any way they can move up unless somehow they played UNLV. But again, they've already played UNLV and beaten UNLV. Is that going to be some impressive deal to make them move up to 11, 10, 9, something like that? I don't think so.
Yeah.
If Colorado wins out, Colorado is going to be ahead of them,
Yeah.
as they should be. BYU, I mean, if they win at Arizona State, who this committee has now ranked at 21, and then they go play more than likely a ranked team in the Big 12 championship game and beat them,
Yeah.
I do think that they would jump ahead. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory like Galloway and some of them were trying to make it sound like on the show tonight. That I'm just telling you, no matter what, one of these Power Four teams are going to be ranked ahead of them. And because the committee is not going to allow one of these power conferences to not be one of the four ranked highest teams. I don't necessarily think it's that. I just think it's, again, Boise doesn't play anybody left. They don't
Yeah.
have anybody left to play that would be impressive enough to keep jumping them.
Yeah.
Colorado does, and BYU definitely does left.
Yeah, I mean, the only slight chance Boise State would have would be if Colorado State were to lose and they get to play UNLV again
Mhm.
in the Mountain West Championship. You get another hashtag ranked win there. And, maybe that isn't enough to keep them above. And maybe all chaos breaks loose the next couple weeks in the Big 12 like it has. And we get Iowa State versus Kansas State in the Big 12 Championship or something.
Yep.
So we just don't know. But top 11, I sent you my predictions yesterday, and I darn near nailed the top 11, except for a couple teams in here. So they got Tennessee at 11. That's kind of where we had them slotted as far as like the 4 two-loss SEC teams, not named Texas A&M.
Yep.
The 4 two-loss SEC teams who have kind of played each other, but Tennessee kind of being the weakest probably on the eye test, and
And the
obviously they got
weakest
the win
schedule.
over. Yeah, and they got the win over Alabama, but obviously they lost to Georgia this past weekend. Georgia actually slots right in front of them at number 10. I think a lot of people maybe figured Georgia would jump to 6 or 7, something like that. I told you they're going to be at 10. I just think like it was the least messy way for the committee to do this tonight.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think they got the order right as far as the SEC teams. You and I in our
Yeah,
rankings, I'm sure you're going to pull up here in a little while.
yeah,
We had it ordered Alabama, then Ole Miss, then Georgia, then Tennessee. And again, the unbalanced schedules. I think the Vols, number one, they haven't looked as impressive. Uh, especially on offense. Defensively, they've looked extremely impressive almost all year. Besides against Georgia in this game, Carson Beck came alive in this past weekend, and after that first quarter, when they outscored Tennessee 31-7, the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the game after getting down 10-zip. That's the first time we've really seen this Tennessee defense this year not look really good. But offensively, again, man, there's just something missing there. There just is with Nico in this passing game. I did not expect to see that this year. We thought Nico was going to be a superstar, and so far he just hasn't. He's
Yeah.
just been okay. And but like again, I know that, like you said a minute ago, this is kind of where it comes into they're giving Alabama like a ranked win against Missouri. Well, because they ranked Missouri at 23. Whether you think Missouri should be ranked at 23 or not, pretty much irrelevant. But like it is, if you're the argument is that Alabama's like got more ranked wins, well, yeah, you ranked Missouri there. Alabama has played South Carolina. Alabama has played Georgia. Uh, and Tennessee hasn't. They played Georgia, but they
Mm-hmm.
didn't play South Carolina. They didn't play
Yep.
Missouri. They didn't play some of the other better teams. They didn't play Ole Miss. They didn't
Yeah.
play Texas, and so on in the SEC. So I think that that's part of the reason why they are ranked where they are. And again, when I watch these teams play right now, Tennessee doesn't look better than Ole Miss, Georgia, and Alabama right now.
Yeah. It's true. The thing with Georgia is they don't have really any other games that are going to move them up. They got UMass
Mm-mm.
this week, then they got Georgia Tech at home, and there's a really good shot that they're probably going to be left out of the SEC championship game. So I can't really see them moving up much and getting a home game in the first round of the playoffs.
No, I don't think they are. And
Which
I'm not going to.
I'm fine with that because Georgia in the playoff, great. But obviously, we've said all season long they have not looked like Georgia. Obviously, their schedule's great, but you got to win some of these games too. You don't just get credit for playing a lot of the teams, right?
Right. Well, I mean, again, they have, and they've
Yeah.
beaten Texas and Tennessee by
Mhm.
double digits.
Yeah.
Both of those games. I know they lost by double digits at Ole Miss and they lost to Alabama, but still,
Yeah.
I don't have a big problem. Again, the biggest problem that I've got, period, in this rankings is the same team again as last week. And spoiler alert, Miami's at 8. And I've got a problem with Miami being 8 and Georgia being 10 and Ole
Yeah.
Miss being 9.
Yeah.
I've
Ole
got a
Miss is
problem.
9. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a problem with that. Miami should not be ahead of those teams.
Nope.
They just shouldn't. The Miami shouldn't be ahead of Tennessee. I would, I guess, give some sort of a like benefit of the doubt with that, maybe, but they should not be ahead of Ole Miss and Georgia. And I'm gonna take that back. They should not be ahead of Tennessee. Screw the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Miami should be at 11.
We don't
Worst
even have them
case.
in our top 12.
No, Miami should be one of these teams I'm looking at that they've got right here. I would not have Miami in the top 12, but they would be behind Tennessee, Georgia, and Ole Miss at this
Yeah.
point. That has nothing to do with SEC or anything like that. It's got to do with strength of schedule, who you've played, who you've beat, how you've looked throughout the year. Miami has been one of those teams too. They've played with their food against multiple teams that are 4 and 5 loss, 6 loss teams, and they should not be ahead of Ole Miss, Georgia, and Tennessee.
Miami should be behind SMU.
Yeah, I'll be okay with that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
SMU's played tougher teams than Miami has.
So let's get to number 7. It was interesting because Alabama was ranked one spot behind Miami last week. Do you think that their dominating win over Mercer was just like an eye opener? And it was like, man, I guess we better move them ahead of Miami. Like, why would they move Alabama playing an FCS team over Miami when Miami was on a bye,
I, I guess they
and
thought
then
Mercer was better than Bye.
not move the other teams up over Miami? Like, why would just one of those teams?
Yeah, I'll
That
be
makes
honest
no
with you.
sense. I
I
mean,
have zero clue. My only answer is I guess they think that Mercer is better than Bye.
I guess, but they just yeah. I mean, we both agree Alabama should be above them, but it just makes no sense why they just decided, you know what, this is the week we should do that. So,
Yeah, and
um,
but real quick, I think that part of this could be they actually mentioned some of that. McElroy mentioned some of this on the show tonight. That a couple of these teams dropped a little bit in the rankings because some of their best wins no longer look like the best. Like for example, Louisville losing at Stanford. That's Miami's best win
yeah,
right now is Louisville. That win definitely got worse. Alabama beat Georgia. That win just looks a lot better.
mhm,
Alabama beat South Carolina. The Gamecocks keep making Alabama's win against them and Ole Miss's win against them look better and better every single week. So I think that could be part of it. But to your point, I just think they got the rankings wrong last week, and they're
Yeah.
probably saying, like, I do think there is part of that, that they're, again, they every week they put the teams back in a hat, or however you want to call it, and they re-rank them, and they're looking at your overall body of work and your overall resume. At least that's what they say they're doing. Who knows what the hell they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And if that is the case, then it does make sense a little bit that, okay, yeah, Alabama's win versus Georgia just got better. Alabama's win versus South Carolina just got better. Miami's win against Louisville doesn't look as good.
Yeah. Number 6, we got Notre Dame. Kind of where we thought they would be.
Mm-hmm.
Game against Army this week, game against USC. And then we get to the top 5. And it was the same top 5 as last week. You got Indiana at 5, Penn State at 4, Texas at 3, Ohio State 2, Oregon 1.
Big Ten bias.
Yeah, heavily.
I'm just kidding, but in all seriousness, we obviously didn't expect the top 5 to change.
Nope.
I'm going to give your Notre Dame squad a little bit of a nod here because you pointed it out not long ago. I mean, obviously that terrible loss to Northern Illinois, the committee has pretty much looked past that to an extent because of they've just been beating the brakes off everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the teams they've played, they're not very good, but they're doing exactly what you're supposed to do as a good football team against teams that aren't very good. That leads me right into the team ranked ahead of them. Again, Indiana has done all year long what you're supposed to do against bad football teams.
Yeah.
I will say for the people that have blasted Indiana because of their schedule in conference, and I mean, that's not really Indiana's fault with who they played in conference. And if you want to blame the Big Ten, I saw some people putting this on X today. I mean, the Big Ten scheduled 2 teams that played in the national championship game last year. That's not the Big Ten's fault that Washington and Michigan are, I mean, they're not booty, but they're not very good. They're not being considered good wins, and rightfully so, in those games. So, that's part of it as well. But I think it's interesting that, I mean, Galloway kind of brought it up, or Booger brought it up. Booger McFarland brought it up. Why is Penn State ahead of Indiana?
Yeah.
And nobody could really give a good answer.
Yeah.
As to why. And I mean, if Indiana goes this week and loses a close game to Ohio State at the Horseshoe, what really is there? What huge difference is there besides the brand between Penn State and Indiana?
Yeah.
The difference is Indiana went on the road and played Ohio State. That's tougher. I mean, really, the only difference I can think of is that Penn State at least played West Virginia in non-conference, a 5-loss Big 12 team who might not even get to bowl eligibility.
Yeah, if you're going to blame Indiana for anything, you got to blame them for their out-of-conference schedule.
Yes.
And honestly, I mean, if you look at the history of Indiana's non-conference schedules, it's what you would expect. Like, they're Indiana football. Like, they were picked 17th in the Big Ten this year.
Yep.
Like, if you know you're going to be, if you think you're going to be down traditionally like you are, you're not going to go out and schedule an out-of-conference game against, South Carolina or, Iowa State or, even teams like that, like let alone a Texas or Alabama or anything like that. So you're going to try to schedule some wins and get some wins. You're going to schedule an FCS opponent like an Indiana State, like they usually do, or something like that. And then you're maybe going to do a Ball State. Like you're going to try to build some wins and build a little just continuity with the team.
Well, a lot of those teams, man, even in the SEC, they do this. The bottom feeder teams in those conferences normally try to schedule easier because they want to get to a bowl game. They want those payouts to get to a bowl game. That's a huge deal to those smaller, like, brand teams in some of those conferences. So, yeah, I don't disagree with you in what you're saying there. It just so happened that Coach Siggs came in and nobody told him that he's supposed to be a bottom feeder in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, though, against the argument of it's not Indiana's fault. Well, it's also not any of these other teams' fault either that are actually playing much better competition. But Indiana will have their shot this week.
I got a question. Like, when did people start? Like, when did they stop appreciating going undefeated? Like, no matter who you play, it feels like it's just not being appreciated anymore. There's
Yeah.
always something you could find with an undefeated team. Like, I mean, they've been doing it with BYU for weeks till they lost. Now they're doing it with Indiana. Everyone loves IU when they were a good story and still until things started getting real and they started winning too many games and it starts to affect your team's chances for the playoffs and all that. Like college football has always been like this. It's always been unbalanced. Like maybe not to the extent that it is now, but we got expansion to thank for that. So we've got these mega conferences with 18 and 16 teams and 17 teams to thank for that. And obviously, the no divisions is obviously not helping. Like I just, I just I don't understand it, man.
Yeah, I have to admit that I'm definitely one of those that argues, for the most part, against the well, just because you're undefeated. Like at some point, you do have to play somebody. And again, it's not everybody else's fault that Indiana hasn't played anybody. It's also not Indiana's fault. Again, so I don't know the right answer, man. I mean, we
Here's
can
here's
all.
my thing. Here's my thing. How can we can be perfectly fine with an undefeated Cincinnati team making a 4-team playoff, just 4 teams,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna question Indiana at 11-1. Like we're talking about a Big Ten football team here. And again, they can't help their conference schedule, but everyone was like, "Yeah, Cincinnati, they're good. You finally, did your time, so you went undefeated. You're in the 4-team playoff." What? How is
Dude,
that cool? And Indiana at 11-1 wouldn't be.
I know this will shock you, but I was also one of those that was like, don't think Cincinnati should have been in there.
Yeah, I mean, just saying, like the consensus was like,
Yeah.
yeah, give him a shot.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, man. It's I don't know what the right answer is, but here's the thing. You just hit it right on the head, man, that these unbalanced schedules in these giant super conferences, this is going to be a thing every single year.
Yeah, how long do you think it takes until we get another shakeup and realignment to where like maybe they get more regional in conferences, or we just go back to divisions?
I don't know, because I think what's going to happen is after 2026 they're going to expand to 16 teams in the playoff. There's already been tons of rumors about that, and so
Yeah,
it gets even more teams in, and I'm sure they'll find some ways to we'll all find some ways to bitch about that too when that
yeah,
time comes.
yeah, yeah.
But I think that's their answer is that like, well, now we got 12 spots. Now we got these huge conferences. Dude, I got another one. I saw somebody put this on X the other day, and I couldn't agree more. I've been thinking about this. What do you think Texas feels like that they finally they're in the SEC now, where everybody thought that they would be in the SEC, that they'd be just getting challenged and the challenge of being in the SEC the week to week. And in the Southeastern Conference, and Greg Sankey just gives them a big old smooch right on them booty cheeks and gives them the easiest freaking conference schedule that they could have possibly given them besides playing Georgia. And there's a chance that Texas could go play against Texas A&M at the end of the year and lose that game. And there's a possible opportunity that they may not get left. They may get left out of the 12-team playoff because they've got too weak of a schedule.
Dude, that might have been reverse psychology by Greg Sankey. We've been talking about him just sucking up to Texas. Maybe he's like, let's give him a weak schedule. They can run through it. Everybody can complain about how weak their schedule was. If they lose a game or two, then they're out. Because I mean, let's be honest. If they can't go to Texas A&M, and I know it's going to be a zoo there that night, like
Mm-hmm.
that might be one of the toughest games to win in college football this year. But if they can't go there and they can't beat Texas A&M, like you probably aren't a playoff team anyways, right?
Yeah, probably not. But like that's the thing though. When it comes down to it, we've already been talking about this, man. If Indiana goes and loses this week, and let's just say Texas were to lose at A&M, I mean, you'd be sitting there at the end of the year looking at 11-1 Indiana, 10-2 Texas. I'm sure there'll be a one or two other teams that you'd be looking at. But your argument, if your argument against Indiana is they haven't beaten anybody, I don't really know what your argument is for Texas
Yeah.
against Indiana, and that's just it's very ironic to me to the fact that they're in the SEC now, and that would be the case.
Yeah.
Dude,
Excuse me.
how about Wisconsin taking Oregon to the brink in Camp Randall Saturday night?
Yeah, they
And
figured out obviously there's a physical way to handle Oregon. That was always going to be. I mean, I think that was Oregon's 8th consecutive
there you go.
conference game, and I think it was their 3rd game in 4th weeks where they were traveling multiple time zones. So I
Yep.
mean, and it was Madison. Like
Spot game.
It was always going to be a spot game. They get a bye this week. I mean, honestly, they get a bye this week. They get to play Washington at home. And if they play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, I think Ohio State will be going on their 7th consecutive game
Yep.
and just facing Indiana and Michigan back to back weeks before that.
Yep. So again, with these unbalanced schedules, man, you pointed it out earlier in the year, before the year even started. I think you bet LSU against Ole Miss like weeks in advance,
Yeah.
expecting that matchup, and got a better line than like what it actually ended up being. You bet it in advance
Yeah.
because of the spot on the schedule. That being Ole Miss's 7th straight game, and LSU was coming off a bye. And this was the same situation. Oregon,
Yeah.
like you said, 8 straight game. Wisconsin off a bye. Oregon 3, time zones like you talked about. That's brutal, man. And it showed. It put a
Yeah.
wear and tear on Oregon. They didn't look like the same team against Whiskey. But hey, hats off to Camp Randall and jump around. And that place is a tough place to play. They
Yeah.
did everything but win that game.
All right. One more team I want to touch on.
Okay.
Penn State. We talked about it a little bit. Why is Penn State above Indiana? I mean, I think Penn State, they may have mastered this whole thing better than Notre Dame. I mean, we talked before the season even started. Notre Dame may have just mastered this to where they don't play in a conference championship game. They're cool with not getting a first round bye. They're cool with getting a home game. They could try to get that 5 seed every year because, as you'll see in the bracket we pull up here in a second, that 5 seed is very advantageous. Penn State, again, not punished at all for losing at home against Ohio State. Yeah, they scheduled West Virginia this year. Penn State doesn't play a P4 team out of conference the next 2 years in 25 or 26. I think they've kind of just said to the committee, prove it to me that you're going to actually value strength of schedule.
Yeah. And they're not, man. They're not. I mean, they so far they haven't. And you're right. All Penn State's going to do is go 11-1 or 10-2 every year, and they're probably going to be a playoff team. And so, like, while you're coughing, I'm gonna keep going, bro. So like, I don't know what, like, as far as Penn State, I mean, the people were putting on Twitter that like, oh, they went and played the mighty SEC. You literally played a Brian Harsin Auburn team. The worst 2 Auburn teams that we've seen in the last like decade plus is who you say you challenged yourself against. Like you said, West Virginia.
Yeah.
No offense to West Virginia, but like, that's who you're talking about challenging yourself against. It's not Texas's fault. Texas challenged themselves going out of conference, playing the defending national champs on the road at Michigan. Next year, they go to Ohio State. But here's the thing. Is that smart right now? We as fans want to see these matchups. But we keep telling you guys that if the committee is not going to actually value strength of schedule and value who you play out of conference, then absolutely the model is you hope that your in-conference schedule is as weak as it can possibly be, and just go schedule week out of conference teams, win your games, you're in the playoffs.
Yeah. And Texas just scheduled a series in 28 and 29 against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So
they're not running from any.
they're doing their part. Yeah. But again, I think we all would just agree, hey, committee, let us know what the parameters are. Let us know where you're going to value strength of schedule in the pecking order. So we all would love for strength of schedule to matter, but unfortunately, it's just not like that. So let's pull up a bracket here and get a look at this beautiful.
Gosh,
thing.
I love seeing a college football with brackets. That's amazing.
Sorry, guys.
Look at that.
Trying not to choke here, but as you know, I've been down with a sickness. So, like I said, Oregon, number 1 seed, Texas, number 2. Miami slotted in as a top ACC team. They're number 3. And then Boise State at 4. And look at that path right there. You got Ohio State losing to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Who would you rather be?
I'd rather be Ohio State.
Exactly.
You'd rather be Ohio State, no doubt about it. At least the 5 seed is a team that played in its conference championship game. Because, man, if a 5 seed could be a team that doesn't even have to play in their conference championship game, and you get that basically a bye week during conference championship weekend, that would even be more advantageous for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were talking about, like Notre Dame getting a 5 seed. Notre
Yeah.
Dame getting a 5 seed would be incredible because, like I said, they would get the BYU. They would get a bye on conference championship weekend. Then they get to play BYU instead of playing the teams you see below there, and then they'd get a chance to play Boise. Or if you flip flop that and BYU's the Big 12 champ and Boise's the 12 seed, then it's the same thing. You're playing the same teams.
Yeah.
Just playing them in different order. So yeah, I mean the 5 seed so far seems extremely advantageous.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
How would you feel about a trip to South Bend 4 days before Christmas?
Oh, I'd love it. I already again. I've told you, man. I've already told Emily, like, you better bundle up, girl. If the Tide's coming up here to the Midwest and playing in Bloomington or playing at Notre Dame, we're gonna go seeing our boy Tyler and heading to Zionsville, and we're going somewhere in the Midwest to go see a cold football game.
Yep. I think Alabama's still got room to move up because they control their destiny. I think to get to the SEC championship game.
They just need Missouri to win one more game. As long as Missouri wins one more game against Mississippi State or Arkansas,
Okay.
and they went out, they're
Okay.
in. That's all they
Okay.
need.
Georgia, like we said, doesn't really have much room to move. Like honestly, they just have room to go down. I mean, now if Notre Dame were to lose to Army or USC, they would probably move Georgia ahead of them.
Yeah.
If Ole Miss loses, sure, yeah, okay,
If
but
Bama were to lose, yeah, obviously, if any of these
yeah,
teams lose ahead of them, they'd move up. But
yeah, but Georgia's not going to be able to improve this on their own.
no, nope.
Ole Miss, I mean, so really, this is kind of saying like, hey, SEC teams, well, you're all going on the road. You got to go up north and prove that you're the best conference in the country, right?
This is a Big Ten's dream, bro. Get these SEC schools up north in December.
Until the
This
SEC comes in there and whoops them, and then the cold weather's not their kryptonite like everybody thought.
can you, dude? Either way this goes, let's just say this is what ends up happening. Let's just say this happens, and all of these SEC teams, the three non-automatic qualifiers, the three at-large SEC teams have to go on the road into Big Ten country in December, no matter which way it goes. Let's just, if the SEC were to go up and go 3-0 in those games, the shit talk would be insane.
Oh yeah,
If the Big Ten did it, it wouldn't be just the Big Ten that would be talking all the trash at the SEC. It'd be the entire country, bro.
oh yeah,
It would be the entire country. It would be the first time that you would see an entire country would be diehard Notre Dame fans. They'd be diehard Penn State fans. And we all know everybody would be pulling hard for Sigs in Indiana because of the story of that. But yeah, they would be literally the SEC us against the world mentality if that were the case. And honestly, man, I'd be all for it. I hope that does end up happening because I think that'd be sick to see what that would look like in those environments.
yeah. Um, all right, let's check out a little BCS know-how. We love those
it.
guys,
Yep.
and they always pull up their BCS rankings. So they nailed the top 5, top 6. They actually had Georgia all the way up at number 7 in the simulated BCS ranking. So a 3-spot difference there from the committee. They had Miami down at number 10. So we actually probably, I think at the top, as far as the top 10 goes, we probably agree with the BCS a little more, right? I mean, even
Yeah,
if you have Georgia ahead of Alabama.
yeah, because I mean, I'm assuming that the BCS, obviously, when you're talking about computers, they're more factoring in metrics than everything else, especially like your strength of schedules and things like that.
It does
Obviously,
include the AP and the coaches poll too.
right.
Yeah.
So Georgia's strength of schedule being what it is, uh, that doesn't shock me. That even though Alabama beat them head to head, I don't know how much the computers are factoring in head to head. I have no idea the answer to that, but I imagine that they're factoring more of the strength of schedule, who you've played, who you've beaten. And even though Georgia lost to Alabama, kind of like SMU, what we talked about a minute ago with SMU and BYU, except the difference there was BYU's actually played a tougher strength schedule than
Yeah.
SMU. So this also has SMU ahead of BYU. That's interesting.
Yep. Boise State, A&M. That's Clemson up to 16. That's crazy. Army getting respect from the computers at 18, actually
Hmm.
ahead of South Carolina. I didn't expect to see that. Um, but I mean, I'm guessing it takes into account just I think going undefeated, obviously.
Hey, looks like the
'Cause
BCS agrees with me on Kansas State.
I know Kansas State's in there. Um, Missouri's still in there, so respect to the computers. Illinois is not in there, but yeah, Kansas State. I mean, there's definitely an argument to be made there.
Yeah, I mean, again, they've beaten two teams that are in the committee's rankings. That's kind of interesting that they're the ones that decided to leave out
Yeah.
in that spot.
Um, all right, give us your just give me some just overall overarching thoughts here while I pull up a couple more things.
Yeah, so I think that the biggest question right now is if chalk flies. If chalk flies in these games, I think the biggest question is going to come down to does the SEC get five teams in the Big Ten three, or is it 4-4? I think in that scenario, with BYU losing, I think you agree with me now. They're not getting two teams in, fair or not,
No.
especially with BYU dropping back to 14. BYU cannot and they cannot go to the Big 12 championship game and play Colorado and lose and still be in the top 12.
Mm-mm.
Colorado, where they're ranked, same thing. Arizona State, where they're ranked, same thing. Iowa State, where they're ranked, same thing. Uh, those are the four teams that are pretty much vying for the Big 12 championship at the moment. And where those four teams are ranked, there's only one of those teams getting in. ACC, I I still don't think that. I think if Miami loses another game, and they're obviously not going to be if they're not the ACC champion and lose another game, they're going to drop out. And I can't see SMU losing a game and able to overcome that, still be in. So I think you agree it's going to be one ACC team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only
Yeah.
chance that you've got to get would be Notre Dame losing another game. I think you would agree. You've already said it. Notre Dame going 10-2, they're done. They're out if they go 10-2. Uh, so really, it really comes down to that. What do you do with Indiana?
Yeah.
What are they going to do with them?
Yeah.
If all these teams in the SEC continue to win, obviously A&M and Texas, A&M's got the biggest opportunity to move the furthest up.
Mm-hmm.
Out of everybody in these rankings, they've got the biggest opportunity to move the furthest. Because
Yep.
if they win at Auburn this weekend, notice I did not say the Texas game. What an awful spot this is, dude. Going on the road to Jordan Hare. Finally, Auburn gets a night game. They don't freaking ever get any night games because of the Brian Harsin era. They were just so bad during that era.
Yeah.
And Freeze had to overtake that roster, and they still haven't been very good under him. They keep losing games, so they haven't really earned a conference night game. Obviously, playing Texas A&M, being ranked where they're at, they finally got them one.
Yeah.
And dude, that's a brutal spot. So, but Texas A&M has the most to gain. If they win against Auburn and then beat Texas, they're going to up the rankings.
Yeah. And
And
obviously, we've got a lot of respect for Texas A&M here. As you can see, we've got them at number 11 in our poll.
yeah,
We think they're better than BYU. We think they're better than Miami.
hmm
But again, they are kind of, as far as those two-loss teams go in the SEC, they are probably easily that fifth team.
yeah, and a lot of that has to do with their schedule as well. That's the most part with it. But again, I think Texas A&M and Tennessee on a neutral field, that's a war right now with how good Texas A&M's defense and pass rush would be, giving Nico and that offense trouble. So as you see, guys, we've got Penn State lower than what the committee has. I think Penn State's a good football team, but again, they haven't played anybody either, and they lost the only game they played against somebody good. As you see, Indiana there at 4. If they go and lose at Ohio State this week, we're going to drop them some too
Yep.
for not playing anybody else. And the only game you did play somebody, you lost. You're going to drop some. Will they drop completely out of our top 12? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what
Yeah.
happens with around them and whatnot. But yeah, Texas A&M in the committee's rankings is probably the main thing that I'm looking at as far as the team that's got the most to gain going forward.
It leaves an interesting question too. Is like with Texas A&M, they get to 10-2, they beat Texas,
Hmm.
and they lose in the SEC championship game to say Alabama. 10-3 A&M team in the SEC championship with a loss. Are they in?
So here, this is doomsday, man, for Texas. Because, like, what I mean, they just play. You know what I mean? They just played on the field against each other, and you beat them. How would you put Texas
Yeah.
in the other again the fifth SEC team that would be on the ropes in that scenario? The only way you could justify it would be if you decided to leave Tennessee out.
I think 11-1 Indiana would be in.
Okay,
And I think, again, yeah, the Big Ten would get 4 teams in. The SEC would get 4 teams in. It would be
so it
Alabama.
would
I think it would be Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Tennessee. I think Tennessee would get in.
if Texas A&M goes to the SEC championship game and loses.
Yeah. And that's what brings me to the point is, do you agree with Lane Kiffin when he said today, or maybe said it yesterday, and how it may be a detriment to make the championship game in some of these conferences?
I mean, what he says makes sense.
I mean, I just don't. I don't know if I truly believe that the committee would really punish someone to, obviously just playing that extra week and having that extra data point and losing. I mean,
Man,
I
if
know
they did
everyone's talking
that,
about it, and a 3-loss team is not going to make the playoffs. A 3-loss, whatever. Like, I don't think you shouldn't be thinking about a 3-loss team making the playoffs. You should be thinking, it would a 9-win team make the playoffs? Like, I
yes,
think you got to get to that double-digit win mark.
yes,
A&M would have that, but again,
yeah.
they would have the 3 losses, and
Man,
it would be up in the air.
you were setting a awful precedent if they did that.
Hmm.
Fair or not, man. If they did that, that would be one awful precedent to set. If A&M beats Texas, they won all the tiebreakers at your conference set. Go
But
play
with
for the
the with,
conference.
with the unbalanced schedules, how would their resume stack up against Tennessee?
Well, they played a better non-conference team in Notre Dame. Now they lost to them, so I don't really know. But again, they lost to them.
Hmm.
SEC schedule wise, I mean Tennessee did beat Bama,
Now
and
A&M would have a win over Texas.
yep, A&M would have a win over Texas, so that would, yeah, that would, and both of those games were at home. Tennessee beat
Hmm.
Bama at home. Texas A&M beat Texas at home. Uh, Tennessee lost at Arkansas. That's the worst, unless I'm just a mistake. That's the worst loss of the two for
Yeah.
sure. Because A&M lost at South Carolina, who's ranked there. Uh, God, man, I mean, really, the biggest difference would come down to is that Tennessee had to play at Georgia, and Texas A&M did not have to play an SEC game, a second SEC game like that. That was to that extent. They didn't have to play one of those other top tier teams at the top, at upper echelon of the SEC. So,
Yeah.
but still, man, it's just going to be hard to convince me that a team in your own conference who has a very similar resume as you, who is not what the committee always talks about as is unequivocally, that word they always like to use every year. You have to be unequivocally better to go over a conference champion. I know Texas A&M would not be a conference champion in that scenario, but they played in the conference championship game in the same conference that the other team did. So I'll ask you the question. Do you think right now today, do you think Tennessee is unequivocally better than Texas A&M?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
I know
Well,
you didn't think I would say that. I
no,
think
that's
their
okay.
defense is
That's
better.
okay.
I think their defense is better.
Okay.
I think I mean, you can make a case that their offense, uh, as a whole, is better than Texas A&M's.
Okay. I don't know that it's unequivocally, but if right now, if you just said if those two teams playing on neutral field, who wins? I'd take Tennessee in that game. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't think they're unequivocally. It's just like there's no doubt they're a better football team. Like I think Ole Miss is no doubt a better football team right now than Tennessee and Texas A&M.
Yeah.
That's unequivocally to me.
Yeah.
That's what that word means to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's going to get interesting because but all of this that we keep talking about, it comes down to the loser of the SEC championship game, a Tennessee or Texas, and one loss Indiana who hasn't beaten a soul. There are going to be a lot of people angry if Indiana is a team that gets in, whether that's fair or not.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to be sitting at.
How about this scenario for the Big Ten? I think this Saturday, I don't think it's even a question that Indiana winning is a better scenario for the Big Ten than Ohio State winning. Because I
Because
think
they
Ohio
can win
State at 10-2 is in.
100%.
Yeah.
Fair or
So
not, they're 100% in.
Yeah, so I think
Well,
Indiana
honestly,
winning.
it is fair. They should be in. They're one of the 12 best teams in college football, and they did beat Penn State at Penn State.
Yeah,
So
they played a heck of a game against Oregon.
yeah,
That's one loss that you really just don't. It's tough to take away from them, even though they lost the game. That's a loss that's not. I mean, when you're talking about best losses in the country, that's I think without a doubt the best loss in the country.
that is the
Yeah,
best loss. Yep. And I know people don't love talking about good losses, bad losses, all that kind of stuff, but I
yeah.
always tell people this every year. I'll say it again. What are you more impressed with? Are you more impressed that Ohio State beat Northwestern at Wrigley Field this weekend like they did? Or is it more impressive that they went on the road across the country to Oregon at night in Autzen Stadium and went to war with Oregon and lost by 1 point?
Yeah, which game got them more power ratings points? Probably the Oregon game.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. So a lot of people don't want to hear that because one game's a loss, one game's a win. It
yeah,
should matter winning. Yes, it does matter.
yeah,
But I'm more impressed with that. So,
yeah,
okay, from the flip side of that, Indiana goes to Ohio State and just goes toe to toe with the Buckeyes in at the Horseshoe, and the Buckeyes win by 3 points, 7 points.
hmm
What's more impressive? Indiana beating the brakes off of Western Illinois, or beating UCLA like they did, or going to the Horseshoe and giving the Buckeyes all they want, going toe to toe with them in the Horseshoe. That's more impressive.
yeah. I think that would be very close to being the most impressive thing Indiana's done this year. I mean,
Yeah.
I think probably as sad as it may seem, because we know the schedule they played, the win at Michigan State was very impressive, and then what they did to Nebraska. I know Nebraska's 5-5 now, but if you look at Nebraska's losses, they're all by like 7 points to USC and to UCLA, and some of these teams, and they beat the brakes off of them. And the next week, Ohio State won by 4 against Nebraska at home. So I think that was pretty impressive too. But let's move on to our beautiful bracket, which we just love. We think it's a much aesthetically pleasing bracket compared to the ESPN bracket. But
I love it.
I love seeing Colorado in there. I mean, I'm not afraid. I'm not a Buff hater anymore. Okay, they got a legit team.
Yeah, dude.
Uh,
I'm pulling for them too, man. I mean, we're fans here. Like, that'd be
would
awesome to see Dion back in Dallas.
I would love to see Colorado play Ohio State that second round. Like that would be fun to watch.
It would. It would. I mean, if you're giving me again, I'm sorry, but if you're giving me the choice, do I get to watch BYU or Arizona State play Ohio State, or I get to watch Colorado play Ohio State? I'd rather watch Colorado play Ohio
Yeah,
State
yeah,
as a fan of the sport. That's what I'd rather see.
yeah, um,
And I want to see Colorado in the Big 12 championship game. I think that'd be
yeah.
sick to see prime time back in Dallas in Jerry's world with his kids, and that bunch. They're exciting to watch, man. They are, and they're a good football team.
They got a big one this week against Kansas. So
Boy, they do. They do.
um, 8-9 matchup. We just got Georgia going right back to Ole Miss, trying to prove it once again. That'd be a tough one for the Dogs.
Mhm.
Um, Tennessee, we got Tennessee in there, so still respect for them. Then we got a flip flop, same matchup, flip flop, and we got Notre Dame going to Alabama because respect to both teams, and we just think Alabama should be ranked ahead of them, even though they got 2 losses. So I don't know. I like our bracket. Still pretty chalky at the top there with Oregon and Texas and Miami, but it'd be fun to watch.
Let me ask you to project a couple of things here. If you had to say right now, who do you think plays in the SEC championship game?
Um, I would say it's gonna be tough for Alabama not to make it there. So I think Alabama makes it, and I think I've seen where if A&M loses this week
Mm-hmm.
and they beat Texas next week,
Mm-hmm.
we're right back to the same thing: Alabama versus Georgia in the SEC championship game.
Yep. Yep.
Texas A&M goes and takes care of business because they obviously still got a lot to play for. I mean, they're right on the heels of the playoff, and I guarantee you they still believe they can make a playoff. So they go and they take care of business at Auburn, which honestly they should do. I know it's at night and everything, but Auburn has just been one of those teams this year that almost seems snake bitten a little bit. Like they
Mm-hmm.
had terrible luck. They've just found ways to lose games, incredible ways, and I think that they should go and take care of business, and they should beat Texas A&M, and then it would be A&M and Alabama.
Yep. I don't really know the answer, but I definitely do think what you just said about Georgia and Alabama is, I mean, again, A&M's only favored by 2.5.
Yeah, I mean
Because
that's just a trap line right there, right?
it is. This is no different than Kansas being a 2.5 point dog
Yeah,
at BYU, at undefeated BYU. That's what that is. This is very similar. That odds makers obviously respect Auburn, and again, their numbers, offensive efficiencies, and different things that you look at with defensively and offensively, their numbers are solid. They just
yeah,
can't win games.
yeah,
Can't get out of their own way. So it absolutely can happen
yeah,
for A&M were to lose this weekend and then turn around and beat Texas in College Station,
yeah,
and then it beat just Georgia and Alabama in the SEC
yeah,
championship game.
yeah.
That absolutely can happen. You
I'm
didn't
surprised
really.
we've gone. I'm surprised we've gone this long, and you haven't, argued for six SEC teams making the playoffs.
No, I ain't going that crazy. I ain't going that crazy.
You're
But
gonna stick with five.
I'm gonna stick with five. Yeah.
Okay. I
I,
mean,
I
listen, everyone's saying it, and we're not arguing it. They're the best conference in the country, right? They've
yeah.
got six teams right there at the top that are better than any other top six teams in the country, including the Big Ten. Yes, everybody's got crappy teams. Yes, every conference has crappy losses to non-conference opponents. Everyone just loves to highlight the SEC teams because they talk the most and they're the biggest and baddest. So they're going to point them out too. They're the best conference. That doesn't mean that there aren't other good teams out there that you play and you wouldn't beat them every single time. I mean, SEC to me, they're the only conference that has an undefeated record in hypothetical games. It's unbelievable. So
I do get what you're saying with that. And again, obviously that's where I'm from, and I'm a huge SEC fan. And I've pointed it out to you many times. I get it why the rest of the country hates the SEC.
yeah,
But like, but that's also what makes the SEC so great is
yeah,
that SEC fans love it and they welcome that.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
so
they got it. They got the trophies to back it up.
yeah, exactly. I mean, 100%. Uh, but I just think that if it comes down to it, it'd be really hard for me not to argue on behalf of if there's five teams that have a significantly tougher strength of schedule and that they don't get in because of a team that has the strength of schedule in the 100s and doesn't have a, as much as I love Signetti and as much as I've been pounding the table for Indiana all year, it'd be hard for me to argue it. And
Well, their schedule, it's going to jump out of the 100s once they
yeah,
play
it
the
will.
number two team. So yeah,
It
but
will.
it's still going to be probably the weakest of the bunch.
Yeah, yeah, it will.
But it
Uh,
just won't look as bad.
no, it won't. But dude, if they go to Ohio State this weekend and they look really good, that's what I want to see as a, if I'm being an unbiased fan just watching this game. What I want to see out of Indiana is for them to look like a really good, like they belong in a battle with Ohio State in the horseshoe. There's a lot of teams that will go into the horseshoe at Ohio State and get their butt kicked. If Indiana does, there's a lot of other teams that would do that. I understand that. But because they haven't played another soul, I'm not giving them that benefit of the doubt, and I'm not going to argue on behalf of that. I did that with Clemson earlier in the year against Georgia when I said that multiple times that, like, okay, everybody acts like the Clemson sucks and Dabo sucks because they got their ass kicked by Georgia. Again, a lot of teams would do that. I'm not going to act like Signetti in Indiana sucks if they get their butt kicked against Ohio State at Ohio State. But I'm not also going to be sitting here and pounding the table and act like, well, a lot of teams would lose at Ohio State, so they should still be a top 10 team or whatever because they haven't played another soul and beaten anybody else.
So you're talking about Penn State or Indiana? I'm confused.
We already know our thoughts on Penn State. Hey, I'm glad you went there. Let's transition to that real quick before we get off here. We're going to talk about this game in our next episode. You and I both
Mm-hmm.
have circled this week's game for Penn State.
Yeah.
I brought it to the attention of a couple of my friends today as well in some text messages. Row the boat, the Gophers, up in Minneapolis this week, coming off a bye and coming off a loss. It's going to be about 28 to 30 degrees, which I know Penn State, State College, Pennsylvania, it's cold there too.
Yeah.
But still, a weather-related game that will affect the play on the field some. It will lean it towards more of a lower scoring defensive slugfest which both of these teams are fine with playing, but that definitely helps Minnesota more.
Mm-hmm.
I think Penn State's in for a dogfight. I could be wrong. I think you've agreed with me on that, but I think they're in for a dogfight against Minnesota and PJ Fleck and them boys this Saturday.
Yeah.
And what a wrench that would throw into things for the Big Ten and
Yeah.
for this committee. If Minnesota were to beat them, could you imagine? Let's just say if Minnesota just miraculously pulls the upset. Could you imagine if the committee comes back next week and has Penn State ranked at like 10 or 11?
I don't want to imagine it.
I agree, but like if that happened, yeah, I I, I don't think that there's
I
any.
don't know if I'd watch college football anymore.
Yeah, I think they would want to do that is the thing, but I think they even know they can't do that. Surely, but that's something
They'd
that
have the
I.
same amount of losses as all those teams in the SEC, including A&M.
Mhm.
Assuming they beat Auburn, I would rank them as far down below as A&M. Like, who's at 15 right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if that happens, I'm telling you, man, we're going to blow up here, and everybody else is too.
Yeah.
But Penn State probably take care of business in that one. But I do. We'll talk more about it next game. But I do think Minnesota's got a shot.
Yeah, I think we're in for a couple weeks of chaos here. I think some things are going to happen that we're not even thinking is going to happen. We just kind of have some scenarios in our head, like this is how it's going to play out. You're going to get Alabama versus A&M or Texas, and you're going to get Oregon versus Ohio State, and I don't think we know anything yet. So obviously, we're going to be back later this week. We're going to be previewing a ton of these games. Before we get out of here, you got any bets you've made this week?
I do.
Okay, let's hear them.
I do. I've got.
Even if they're games that we're going to preview,
Yeah.
let's get the numbers out there early. Let's hear them.
Okay. I've got two
Okay,
already.
I've got 5.
All right, man. Let's throw some best bets out here for those that have stuck around and still listening live. We appreciate it. We see a few people even more trickling in
Yeah.
on X right now. The first bet I made of the week. I'm just going to keep putting my money where my mouth is with how good I think this football team is. I'm glad I took it when I did, but I got Ole Miss at 9.5. It has jumped up to 10.5. I think the
Okay.
books are shaking. When I came in with a bet on Ole Miss, the books started shaking, bro, and and they made that line higher.
Okay.
But I got Ole Miss at 9.5, and I know a lot of people are going to go, well, Ole Miss lost at LSU, and Florida just beat LSU. Uh, yeah, if you've seen Ole Miss play these last several weeks, I just think it's a bad matchup for Florida.
Yeah.
Uh, Big win for Florida, big, huge emotional win. Now they got to get back up again the next week, play Ole Miss. Ole Miss is the team now coming off a bye. Florida has played 3 consecutive weeks against Georgia, Texas, and LSU. And now they're playing their 4th straight game in a row, 4 weeks in a row in this gauntlet against, in my opinion, the best team of those 4
Yeah.
in Ole Miss, who's coming off a bye. So yeah, I'll take Ole Miss minus 9.5 in that
Okay.
spot. And a kind of off the radar game. It's not one of your bigger games at all. Uh, my boys, helmet right behind me here. I'm gonna take Virginia Tech. I took Virginia Tech minus 3 at Duke
Okay.
on the road at Duke. I think my Hokies get it done this week against the Blue Devils. Uh, Virginia Tech also is coming off a bye, much needed. They had some guys that were banged up the last few weeks, and I think they take care of business in Durham against Manny Diaz and the boys. And again, me growing up a Virginia Tech and Alabama fan, my whole family being from that Blacksburg, New River Valley area, Virginia, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Radford, Virginia. Uh, there will be a ton of Hokie fans in the stands in Durham on Saturday. They always travel well to those games in that Raleigh Durham area. So I got the Hokies minus 3, and again, it's gone up to 3.5. So
Yeah.
again, books are shaking when I'm placing these bets, bro.
Okay. I was thinking about the Blue Devils in that one, so I'm gonna have to look a little bit more into it now. We might go head to head later in the week,
That's
so we'll
fine.
see. Like I said, I got 5.
Okay.
I want to spray the books this week. I had like a low week last week. Just didn't really have a good feel on a lot of the games, but
Yeah.
I feel like I got an early feel on a lot of these games. First one I started out with G5 Conference USA, Western Kentucky, going on the road to
G5
face
tie.
they're going on the road to face the Liberty Flames, the alma mater.
You're going to get your
And
alma mater.
if I don't know if anybody's out there has watched a lot of Liberty games. I don't know if you have. I watched a
Nope.
couple of them, and
Haven't
they're
seen the
not
tape.
impressive. They're not impressive. They played the weakest schedule in the country. Not impressive. I know Western Kentucky, they're coming off a loss against Louisiana Tech. But before that, they won four straight. They're on a roll. And I took them on the money line at minus 105 to go in to Lynchburg into Williams Stadium. Beautiful area. Love the mountain. But I got them come out with the victory there. Took West Virginia plus 3 at home
I like it.
against the Gus Bus and UCF. I think it's going to be maybe in the high 30s, low 40s in Morgantown on Saturday. Not good for a UCF team that is not going to make a bowl this year. Well, I guess they still have a chance, right? They're 4-6. Regardless,
Last home game for the Mounties as well, and
well,
they need one more win to get to bowl eligibility as well.
and they've been awful at home this year, but like I said, senior day, I think they get it done at home. It's going to be a
Mhm.
cold weather game. So I took West Virginia plus 3. I took the Irish minus 14 when it dipped down to 14. I think it's back up to 14 and a half, 15. Um, all respect to the troops. I love my troops. But this is just a game where, again, I try not to look too much into strength of schedule disparity when teams are playing each other because I don't know if it factors in that much. But again, they play the 133rd ranked schedule. The past couple weeks, even with Bryson Daly coming back, they won by what, a couple touchdowns against North Texas. Like, just haven't looked all that impressive against that week's schedule as they did the first 5 or 6 games. It's going to be in Yankee Stadium. It's a Shamrock Series game. Notre Dame just does not lose Shamrock Series games. They rarely lose against Academy teams. We saw them play Navy earlier this week when Navy was ranked highly, and they beat them by 37.
Didn't you say
So,
these neutral? Didn't you say too Notre Dame in these neutral site games have been pretty much just they
yeah,
thrashed Georgia Tech earlier this year. They
yeah,
thrashed Navy earlier this year.
yeah,
Uh, they've been doing yeah. You brought that up earlier in the year that how good
yeah.
they've been in these neutral site games.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that when we preview the game. But I took an early look at Notre Dame minus 14. Also, I'm not scared of Death Valley at night. Okay. And if you've seen LSU, they got these ugly yellow, gold, whatever they want to call them, uniforms coming out. And they think they're going to, have a big night atmosphere. It's on the SEC network. Like, nobody cares. You know who's coming in there? Diego Pavia and the boys off of a bye
Hmm.
as dogs again, where they're 6-1 against the spread. And I lost last time out, taking them as dogs against South Carolina. But I grabbed them earlier this week at plus 8.5, and it's down to 7.5. So we got the books shaking here, my man. I'm gonna ride with Diego
Look at us,
Pavia one
bro.
more
We're just a
time.
couple sharp, just a couple sharps.
Yeah, Diego Pavia again. I mean, you look ahead to Vandy, Tennessee next week. I might do Diego Pavia again. You never know. Um, last bet. Went ahead and took it today when I saw it tick up to what I believe is the highest number it's going to be. And I took the Hoosiers plus 13 and a half.
I knew you were going to do
Uh,
it.
I think it's going to be difficult for that to get to 14. I think we're going to preview this game obviously in depth on our next episode. Uh, Sigs, they've had a week off. They've been able to get healthy, which is huge for that offensive line who had to replace the starting guard last time. He's going to have the boys motivated. Ohio State has had a grueling schedule. Obviously, I mean, Northwestern, all of that's not grueling, but consecutive weeks without a bye. I think this is their fourth consecutive game. So it's just a little bit of a schedule mismatch. I think Indiana's been hearing all the talk about they haven't played anyone. Like, they're just not doing anything. Like, they're probably thinking, yeah, I mean, other than Michigan, like we said, beat the brakes off of everybody. So I think they've heard the talk. They're going to be motivated to go in there and at least have a respectable showing. That one could come back and bite me. I don't know, but I think 13.5 was too much for Indiana there. So I took them at 13.5.
Honestly, man, I don't really disagree with any of those. Uh, so yeah, I'm personally waiting to see if it gets to 14. If it does get to 14, I'll be riding the Hoosiers with you in that spot.
Yeah.
And even if it goes down to 13, I may take a shot at
Yeah.
Indiana with you. Uh, I don't think Indiana wins the game, but I do think that they can play with Ohio State.
Yeah. I don't think they win the game either, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm gonna see if it gets 14-2, and I got a cash out option on the book. So, you got anything else you want to touch on?
No, man. Didn't have as much disagreement with the rankings this week. We had some, obviously, that we discussed.
Yeah,
It's just each week it's going to get crazier and crazier, man, to see where some of these teams end up. Especially like you said, if we do get some chaos, like if we were to get a Minnesota upset over a Penn State, or if we were to get an
yeah,
Indiana happen to pull it off against
yeah.
Ohio State, if one of these other SEC teams get upset, Texas A&M at Auburn, and then Texas A&M beat Texas, or if Alabama were to lose at Oklahoma or against Auburn, it's just there's still plenty of spots where we
Oh
could
yeah.
see some very much so see some chaos, like you said.
Yep. All right, that's it for us. Appreciate everybody tuning in on YouTube and X tonight. A lot of good viewership tonight, so appreciate that. We'll be back next episode here in a couple days. We'll be previewing this upcoming Saturday. We've only got 2 weeks left, but these are probably some of my favorite 2 weeks in college football. And then not to mention, obviously, the conference championship games coming up. So appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. Follow us on all of our, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, TikTok, everything. We appreciate it. Share it, rate the show, give us 5 stars. We love it. We'll be back next time. So appreciate you tuning in. Thanks.